The evening rush had begun at the Silver Spoon, one of the most expensive restaurants in downtown Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables draped in pristine white cloths. The soft notes from a grand piano usually filled the air, but tonight, the corner where it stood remained silent. In the kitchen, Mei Lin balanced 3 plates along her arm with practiced ease. At 23, she had the tired eyes of someone much older. Her black hair was pulled back in a neat bun, not a strand out of place despite having been on her feet for nearly 10 hours. "Order for table 12, she called out, placing the dishes on the counter. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and checked her watch. 2 more hours until her shift ended. 2 more hours of smiling at people who barely looked at her, of carrying plates that cost more than what she made in a day. Mei had been working double shifts at the Silver Spoon for almost a year now. The pay was better than most restaurants and the tips helped cover Grandma Lou's medical bills. Between work and taking care of her grandmother, Mei managed to squeeze in a few classes at the community college. Her dreams of becoming a concert pianist felt like they belonged to another lifetime. "Mei, table 16 needs their check," Sam, another server, said as he rushed past her with a bottle of expensive wine. Mei nodded and grabbed her notepad. As she walked through the dining area, she glanced at the empty piano. Mr. Reynolds, the regular pianist, had called in sick. The manager had been on edge all evening, pacing back and forth and checking his phone every few minutes. "Is everything all right?" Mei asked when she passed by him. Mr. Walsh ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Pierce is coming in tonight." Mei felt her stomach drop. Nathan Pierce was one of their most demanding customers, a tech billionaire with a reputation for being impossible to please. His company had revolutionized artificial intelligence, and his face regularly appeared on the covers of business magazines. At 35, he was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. He specifically asked about the live music when he made the reservation. Mr. Walsh continued, "Said he was bringing important investors. I've been calling every pianist in my contacts, but everyone's booked." "I'm sure it'll be fine," Mei said, though she knew it probably wouldn't be. Pierce was known for his temper. "Let's hope so." Mr. Walsh straightened his tie and forced a smile. "Table 16 needs their check?" "On it," Mei said, hurrying away. For the next hour, the restaurant filled with the usual crowd of business people, celebrities, and the occasional tourist splurging on a fancy meal. Mei moved between tables with quiet efficiency, refilling water glasses, taking orders, and delivering food. Her feet ached, but she had learned to ignore the pain. At exactly 8 o'clock, the front doors opened and Nathan Pierce walked in. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, his brown hair styled in a way that probably cost more than Mei's monthly rent. 5 men and women in equally expensive clothes followed him. The host rushed forward, bowing slightly. "Mr. Pierce, welcome back. Your table is ready." Nathan barely acknowledged him with a nod. His sharp eyes scanned the restaurant, pausing when they reached the empty piano. "Where's the music?" he asked, his voice carrying across the room. Mr. Walsh appeared instantly at his side. "Mr. Pierce, I deeply apologize. Our pianist called in sick and we've been unable to find a replacement on such short notice." Nathan's face hardened. "I specifically mentioned music when I made this reservation. I promised my guests an exceptional experience." He gestured to the important-looking people behind him. "This is not starting well. I understand, sir. Perhaps we could play some recorded music?" Nathan cut him off with a cold laugh. "If I wanted recorded music, I would have stayed home." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners watched the scene unfold, some with curiosity, others with embarrassment. Mei stood frozen by the kitchen door, a tray of appetizers in her hands. "I apologize, sir," Mr. Walsh said again, his forehead shiny with sweat. "Please let me show you to your table. The chef has prepared a special menu for you and your guests." Nathan didn't move. "I chose this restaurant because you claim to offer a complete experience. The ambiance, the food, the service, and the music." He glanced at his watch. "You have 30 minutes to find someone who can play that piano or we'll take our business elsewhere." Mr. Walsh's face paled. 30 minutes? "Yes, sir. I'll do my best." As Nathan and his group were led to the best table in the house, Mr. Walsh pulled out his phone and stepped outside, desperation clear on his face. Mei delivered the appetizers to table 7 and then slipped into the break room. Through the small window, she could see into the dining area. Nathan Pierce sat at his table, occasionally checking his watch while his guests spoke among themselves. Something tightened in May's chest as she looked at the grand piano. Before her parents died, before money became the only thing that mattered, she had been on track to study at one of the best music schools in the country. For years, the piano had been her life. She had played in competitions, received standing ovations, been called a prodigy by teachers and critics alike. But then the accident happened. With both parents gone and a grandmother to take care of, May had put away her sheet music and picked up job applications instead. She hadn't touched a piano in almost 5 years. "He's going to leave," Sam said, entering the break room and collapsing into a chair. "Walsh can't find anyone. If Pierce walks out, we're all going to hear about it for weeks." May bit her lip. I could play." Sam looked up at her. "What? I used to play. I was pretty good, actually." The words felt strange coming out of her mouth. She rarely talked about her past. "Are you serious?" "You should tell Walsh." May hesitated. What if she couldn't do it anymore? What if years without practice had taken away whatever talent she once had? But then she thought about Mr. Walsh's panic, about how much the restaurant needed Pierce's business. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll talk to him." When Mr. Walsh came back inside, his face ashen, May approached him. "Mr. Walsh, I might be able to help with the piano situation." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I can play. I studied for years before I started working here." Hope flickered across his face. "You can play? Well enough for—" He glanced toward Pierce's table. "I was going to study at Juilliard," May said, the name of the prestigious school feeling foreign on her tongue after so long. "Juilliard?" Mr. Walsh repeated, his eyes widening. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" May shrugged. "It never came up." Mr. Walsh checked his watch. "We have 15 minutes before he walks out." "Are you sure about this?" No, she wasn't sure. The thought of playing again, especially in front of someone like Nathan Pierce, made her stomach twist into knots. But she nodded anyway. "I'll need to wash my hands," she said. Of course. And you can take off your apron?" Mr. Walsh was already untying it for her. "Sam can cover your tables." 5 minutes later, May stood beside the grand piano, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Her hands felt clammy. She wiped them on her black pants and took a deep breath. From across the room, she could feel Nathan Pierce watching her. His expression was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Clearly, he hadn't expected a server to step up to the challenge. May sat down on the bench and lightly touched the keys, not pressing down yet, just feeling their smooth coolness under her fingertips. Memories washed over her. Her mother standing behind her during practices, her father's proud smile at recitals, the countless hours she had spent perfecting each note. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then, with a silent prayer that she hadn't forgotten everything, she began to play. The first few notes were hesitant, her fingers remembering an old classical piece she had once known by heart. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, simple enough to ease back into playing, but beautiful in its melody. As she continued, her fingers grew more confident. The music filled the restaurant, gentle and flowing. She kept her eyes on the keys, too nervous to look up and see the reaction of the diners, or worse, of Nathan Pierce. But when the piece ended, she heard scattered applause. She risked a glance up and saw several diners smiling at her. At Pierce's table, one of the women was nodding appreciatively. Nathan Pierce himself wasn't applauding. Instead, he was watching May with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. He raised his glass slightly in her direction, a gesture that seemed more challenge than approval. Taking a deep breath, May began another piece, this one more complex. As she played, she felt something awakening inside her, a part of herself she had buried along with her dreams. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget, the hours of practice shaping her muscle memory. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't a waitress working double shifts to make ends meet. She was just May, the girl who once made music that could move people to tears. Mr. Walsh appeared at her side as she finished the second piece. "He wants to speak with you," he whispered, nodding toward Pierce's table. May's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Was her playing not good enough? With shaking legs, she stood and followed Mr. Walsh to where Nathan Pierce sat. Up close, his eyes were even more intimidating, a piercing blue that seemed to see right through her. "You're the waitress," he said, not a question but a statement. May nodded. "Yes, sir." And you play piano? I used to. It's been a while. He studied her for a long moment, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carrying a challenge that would change the course of May's life forever. Play something harder, he said. Something that will really show us what you can do. Something harder? May repeated, her mouth suddenly dry. Nathan Pierce leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Yes, those pieces were adequate. But I'm wondering if you actually have real talent or if you're just someone who took a few lessons as a child. One of his guests, a woman with silver-streaked hair, shot him a disapproving look. Nathan, the young lady is doing you a favor. He shrugged. I'm offering her an opportunity, Vivian. A chance to play for people who might actually be able to help her career if she's any good. His eyes never left May's face, unless of course she's perfectly content serving overpriced food for the rest of her life. May felt heat rising to her cheeks. Part of her wanted to walk away, to tell this arrogant man exactly what she thought of him. But another part, the part that still dreamed of music despite everything, wouldn't let her. What would you like to hear? She asked, keeping her voice steady. A hint of surprise flickered across Nathan's face as if he hadn't expected her to accept his challenge. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 3, First Movement. May's heart sank. He had deliberately chosen one of the most technically challenging pieces in the classical repertoire, one that had taken her months to master back when she practiced. For hours every day. I don't have an orchestra, she said, trying to buy time as panic rose within her. I think we'll manage without one, he replied dryly. Just the piano part will do. Mr. Walsh hovered nearby, his expression anxious. Ms. Lynn, if this is too much, it's fine, May cut in. She wouldn't give Nathan Pierce the satisfaction of seeing her back down. I'll need a moment to prepare. As she walked back to the piano, her legs felt like they might give out beneath her. She hadn't played Rachmaninoff in years, and even then it had been a struggle. The piece required not just technical skill but physical endurance. A marathon for the fingers that left even experienced pianists exhausted. She sat down at the bench and closed her eyes, trying to recall the notes, the rhythm, the feeling of the piece. In her mind, she could see her old teacher standing over her, tapping out the tempo with a wooden stick. From the heart, May. Always from the heart. Taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening was hesitant. Her fingers stumbled over notes that had once been as familiar as her own name. She could feel Nathan watching her, probably smirking at her mistakes. But as she continued, something shifted. The music began to flow more naturally, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. The restaurant faded away, and May was 17 again, preparing for the audition that would determine her future. Hours of practice, calluses on her fingertips, the weight of her parents' expectations. The music built in intensity, her hands flying across the keyboard in a blur of motion. It wasn't perfect. She missed notes here and there, simplified passages that were beyond her current ability. But the essence of the piece, its power, its emotion, remained intact. She poured everything into it, her frustration with Nathan, her grief for her parents, her regret for the path not taken. When she finally reached the end of the movement, May was breathing hard as if she had run a race. Sweat dampened her forehead and her arms ached from the exertion. The last notes hung in the air, and then silence fell over the restaurant. She didn't want to open her eyes, didn't want to see the judgment on Nathan's face. But when the applause started, hesitant at first, then growing louder, she couldn't help but look up. Diners were standing, clapping enthusiastically. An elderly man at a nearby table wiped tears from his eyes. Even the kitchen staff had paused their work to listen, and now stood in the doorway applauding. At Nathan's table, his guests were joining in the applause. All except Nathan himself, who remained seated, his expression unreadable. Mr. Walsh rushed to her side. That was incredible, he whispered. I had no idea. I mean, you said Juilliard, but... May managed a shaky smile. Her hands were trembling from the exertion and emotion. Thank you. Mr. Pierce would like you to join them, Mr. Walsh added, nodding toward the table. I've asked Sam to cover your section for the rest of the night. May's stomach tightened with anxiety, but she nodded and followed him back to Nathan's table. This time, one of the guests, a balding man with kind eyes, pulled out an empty chair for her. Please sit, he said. That was remarkable. Thank you, May replied, sitting down carefully, her back straight as a board. I'm Thomas Chen, the man continued. I teach at the Manhattan School of Music. May's eyes widened. The Manhattan School of Music was one of the top conservatories in the country. You have extraordinary talent, Thomas said. Where did you study? Before May could answer, Nathan cut in. She didn't, at least not formally. His eyes were calculating as they studied her. Isn't that right? May swallowed hard. I was accepted to Juilliard 5 years ago, but I never attended. A murmur of surprise went around the table. Why not? Asked Vivian, the silver-haired woman. May looked down at her hands. Server's hands now, with short nails and small burns from hot plates. My parents died in a car accident a month before I was supposed to start. I needed to take care of my grandmother, and we needed the money, so... She trailed off, not wanting to share more of her personal life with these strangers. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. May wished she could disappear. Well, Thomas said finally, it's never too late. With your talent, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Nathan interrupted. That performance was passionate, I'll give you that, but it was far from technically perfect. May felt her cheeks flush with humiliation. I haven't played in 5 years, she said quietly, and I didn't have time to prepare. Exactly my point, Nathan replied. Raw talent only gets you so far. Without discipline, without dedication, it means nothing. Thomas frowned. Nathan, that's a bit harsh. Considering the circumstances. Life is harsh, Nathan said, cutting him off again. The music world is harsher. If she's serious about playing, she needs to hear the truth, not empty flattery. May stood up abruptly. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Pierce. If you'll excuse me, I should get back to work. Sit down, Nathan said, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. I'm not finished. May hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Mr. Walsh caught her eye from across the room, his expression pleading. Slowly, she sank back into her chair. Better, Nathan said with a nod. Now here's what I propose. You play for us for the remainder of our dinner. If you impress me by the end of the night, I'll pay you what you would make in tips for a week. May blinked in surprise. And if I don't impress you? A cold smile played at the corners of his mouth. Then you're fired. You can't fire her, Vivian protested. You don't own this restaurant. No, Nathan agreed, but I am its biggest investor. A fact the management is well aware of. He turned back to May. So, what will it be? May looked around the table. Thomas and Vivian seemed embarrassed by Nathan's behavior, while the other guests appeared uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge him. Nathan, Thomas began. It's fine, May interrupted. She met Nathan's gaze directly. I'll do it. Nathan raised an eyebrow, a hint of respect flickering in his eyes. Good. As May walked back to the piano, her mind raced. The money Nathan was offering would cover Grandma Lou's medication for at least a month. But if she failed, if she lost this job, finding another one that paid as well would be difficult. She sat down at the piano again, flexing her fingers. The next few hours would be a test of endurance as much as skill. What pieces should she play? What would impress someone like Nathan Pierce? Looking back at the table, she saw him watching her, waiting for her to falter. His challenge wasn't just about music. It was about power, about putting her in her place. He expected her to fail. May straightened her shoulders. She might not have played in years. She might not have the advantages his money could buy. But she had something he couldn't take away. The music that lived inside her. The music her parents had nurtured, had sacrificed for. Her fingers found the keys and she began to play again. A Chopin etude this time, its cascading notes filling the restaurant like water. She would play until her fingers bled if necessary. She would play until he had no choice but to acknowledge her talent. As the evening wore on, May moved from one piece to another, drawing from the repertoire she had once known by heart. Beethoven, Mozart, Debussy, some came back easily, flowing from her fingertips as if no time had passed. Others were more fragmented and she had to improvise, filling in the gaps where memory failed her. Occasionally she glanced at Nathan's table. His guests seemed to be enjoying themselves, sometimes pausing their conversation to listen when she began a new piece. Nathan himself remained inscrutable, showing neither approval nor disapproval. By the third hour, May's arms ached and her back protested the unaccustomed posture. She had forgotten how physically demanding piano playing could be, but beneath the discomfort there was also a growing sense of joy. She was playing again, really playing, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. During a brief pause between pieces, Mr. Walsh appeared with a glass of water which she drank gratefully. "You're doing wonderfully," he whispered. "The other diners are asking about you. Several have left extra tips specifically for you." May smiled tiredly. "Thanks for letting me know. How much longer do you think he'll make you play?" She glanced at Nathan's table. They were on dessert now. "Not much longer, I hope." As Mr. Walsh walked away, May took a deep breath and considered her next piece. She had played almost everything she could remember, from dramatic concertos to delicate nocturnes. What else could she do to impress Nathan? And then it hit her. Maybe trying to impress him was the wrong approach. Maybe what she needed to do was stop playing for him and start playing for herself. With renewed determination, May turned back to the piano and began a piece she had written herself years ago after her parents' death. It was raw and imperfect, lacking the polish of the classical masterpieces, but it was hers. Every note came from her own heart, her own experience. As the melody unfolded, soft and hesitant at first, then building in intensity, May closed her eyes and let the music carry her. She didn't see Nathan Pierce stand up from his table. She didn't see him walk across the restaurant floor. She only became aware of his presence when she opened her eyes and found him standing beside the piano, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. May's fingers faltered on the keys when she saw Nathan standing there. She hadn't noticed him approach, too lost in her own music. His expression was different now, the cold arrogance replaced by something more complex. "What was that piece?" he asked quietly. "I don't recognize it." May's hands rested in her lap. "It's something I wrote. After my parents died." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. "You compose as well?" "Not anymore," May replied. "That was the only piece I ever finished." For a moment, Nathan said nothing, just studied her with those piercing blue eyes. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card, placing it on top of the piano. "Play it again," he said, "from the beginning." Before May could respond, he turned and walked back to his table. His guests were watching curiously, no doubt wondering what had prompted him to approach the piano. May looked down at the business card. It was minimalist, just his name, the name of his company and a phone number, all in elegant silver lettering against a black background. She slipped it into her pocket, then positioned her hands over the keys once more. This time, knowing Nathan was listening specifically to her composition, she felt more nervous. This piece wasn't like the classical masterpieces she'd been playing all night. It wasn't polished or technically impressive. It was just honest. As she played, memories of writing the piece flooded back. The lonely nights after the funeral, sitting at her parents' old upright piano in their apartment, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The melody had come to her in fragments, a few notes here, a phrase there, until eventually it formed a complete piece that somehow captured both her grief and her hope. When she finished, she kept her eyes closed for a moment, gathering herself. The restaurant had fallen silent again. When she finally looked up, she saw that Nathan and his guests were preparing to leave, putting on coats and gathering belongings. Her heart sank. Had she failed the challenge? Was she about to lose her job? Mr. Walsh hurried over to the piano. "They're leaving," he said. "Mr. Pierce wants you to meet them at the door." May stood up, her legs stiff from sitting so long. "Did he say anything about my playing?" "No," Mr. Walsh replied, looking worried. "But the other guests loved it. We've had people asking if you're a regular performer here." That was little comfort if Nathan had decided she wasn't good enough. May made her way to the front of the restaurant where Nathan and his party were waiting. She noticed Thomas Chen, the music teacher, giving her an encouraging smile. "Ms. Lin," Nathan said formally when she approached. "Thank you for your performance this evening." May held her breath, waiting for his verdict. It was adequate, he continued, and May's hopes plummeted. "The classical pieces showed technical skill, though your lack of recent practice was evident." Vivian made a small sound of protest, but Nathan silenced her with a look. "However," he added, "your original composition was unexpected. It showed something beyond mere technical ability." His expression remained unreadable. "I believe I owe you a week's worth of tips." Relief washed over May. She hadn't failed. Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. How much would that be, approximately? About $400, May said, the sum feeling both significant and insignificant at once. A fortune to her, pocket change to him. Nathan wrote out a check, tore it from the book, and handed it to her. May glanced down and her eyes widened. The amount was for $2,000. This is too much, she said automatically, trying to hand it back. Consider it an investment, Nathan replied, not taking the check. And a down payment. A down payment for what? We'll discuss that tomorrow. Nathan nodded toward the business card in her pocket. Call that number at 9 a.m. sharp. My assistant will put you through. Before May could respond, he turned and headed for the door, his guests following behind. Thomas Chen paused beside her. That was quite impressive, he said warmly, especially considering how long it's been since you played regularly. If you're interested in exploring music again, I'd be happy to help. He handed her his own card, then hurried to catch up with the others. May stood frozen in place, the two cards and the check in her hand, feeling impossibly heavy with potential. What just happened? Mr. Walsh asked, appearing at her side. May shook her head slowly. I'm not entirely sure. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The restaurant closed at midnight and May helped with the final cleanup, moving mechanically as her mind raced with questions. What did Nathan want from her? Why the sudden interest in her music? And should she actually call him in the morning? It was nearly 1 a.m. when she finally left the Silver Spoon. The city streets were quieter now, though New York never truly slept. May wrapped her coat tighter around herself as she headed for the subway station. Her apartment was in Queens, a small one-bedroom she shared with Grandma Liu. The rent was too high for the space, but it was close to a good hospital, which made Grandma's frequent appointments easier to manage. When May quietly let herself in, she was surprised to find her grandmother still awake, sitting in her favorite armchair with a book. You're home late, Grandma Liu said in Mandarin, closing her book. At 72, she was still sharp-minded, though her body had grown frail with age and illness. Busy night? You could say that, May replied in the same language. She sat down on the footstool in front of her grandmother and pulled out the check. Look. Grandma Liu put on her glasses and squinted at the check. Her eyes widened. $2,000? Did you rob the restaurant? May laughed. No, I played the piano. The piano? Grandma Liu's face softened. Oh, May, you haven't played in so long. I know. May tucked the check back into her pocket. It's a long story. She gave her grandmother the short version, the missing pianist, Nathan's challenge, the hours of playing, and his unexpected request to call him tomorrow. This man, Grandma Liu said thoughtfully when May finished. You don't like him. It wasn't a question. May sighed. He's arrogant and demanding. He treated me like I was a toy to be played with, something to entertain his guests. But he recognized your talent, Grandma pointed out, and he paid you generously for it. Yes, but why? What does he want from me? Grandma Liu shrugged. You won't know unless you call him. May bit her lip. What if he's just toying with me? What if this is all some game to him? Then you hang up the phone, her grandmother said simply. But what if it's not? What if this is an opportunity? The kind you gave up when your parents died? May looked away. She had never blamed her grandmother for the choice she'd made. It had been her decision to set aside her dreams to take care of her only remaining family. But sometimes in the quiet moments between shifts or late at night when she couldn't sleep, she wondered what might have been. Your mother and father would want you to play again, Grandma Liu said softly. They sacrificed so much for your music. I know, May whispered. Her parents had worked extra jobs to pay for her lessons, had moved to a smaller apartment so they could afford a better piano for her to practice on. They had believed in her talent completely. Get some sleep, Grandma Liu said, patting May's hand. Tomorrow you'll call this man and hear what he has to say. Then you can decide. May nodded and helped her grandmother to bed before going to her own room, but sleep eluded her. She lay awake, replaying the events of the evening in her mind. The feel of the piano keys beneath her fingers after so long, the way the music had flowed through her, bringing back a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. At 5 a.m, she gave up on sleep and quietly slipped out of bed. In the corner of their small living room stood an electronic keyboard, a poor substitute for a real piano, but all they could afford in this tiny apartment. May hadn't touched it in years. She plugged in headphones so she wouldn't wake her grandmother, then turned it on. The plastic keys felt nothing like the grand piano at the restaurant, But it didn't matter. She began to play her composition again, the one that had apparently caught Nathan's attention. As the familiar notes flowed from her fingers, May felt tears welling in her eyes. How had she survived so long without this? Music had been her voice, her refuge, her joy. Giving it up had been like losing a limb, but somehow she had convinced herself it was necessary. By the time the sun rose, May had made her decision. She would call Nathan Pierce at 9 o'clock. She would hear what he had to say. And no matter what came of it, she would find a way to bring music back into her life. At 8:55, May sat at the small kitchen table, Nathan's business card in front of her, her phone in her hand. Her grandmother had gone out for her morning walk, a daily ritual she insisted on despite her doctor's concerns, leaving May alone with her thoughts. At exactly 9, she dialed the number. Pierce Innovations, a crisp voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" "My name is May Lynn," she said, her mouth dry. "Nathan Pierce asked me to call him at 9. "One moment, please." There was a pause, and then the assistant returned. "Miss Lynn, Mr. Pierce is expecting your call. I'll put you through now." Another pause, and then Nathan's voice came through the line. "Ms. Lynn, punctual, I appreciate that." "You said 9 o'clock, May replied. "I did." She could almost hear him smiling. "Tell me, have you had breakfast?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Breakfast," he repeated. "The meal people typically eat in the morning." "I know what breakfast is," May said, irritation creeping into her voice. "I just don't understand why you're asking." "Because I'd like to continue our conversation from last night, and I find it's easier to do so over a meal. There's a cafe near your apartment." "The Blue Spoon, do you know it?" May frowned. "Yes, but how do you know where I live?" "I make it my business to know things," Nathan replied smoothly. "The cafe in 30 minutes. Does that work for you?" Every instinct told May to refuse, to hang up the phone and forget about Nathan Pierce and his games. But curiosity, and the memory of her fingers on the piano keys, won out. "I'll be there," she said. The Blue Spoon was a small cafe tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore. Despite living just a few blocks away, May rarely went there. It was the kind of place that charged $6 for a cup of coffee, catering to the young professionals slowly taking over the neighborhood. She arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater, the nicest casual clothes she owned. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she'd even put on a touch of makeup, though she wasn't sure why she'd bothered. This wasn't a job interview. At least she didn't think it was. To her surprise, Nathan was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of pastries. He wore a dark gray sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his casual attire still somehow looking expensive. He stood when he saw her, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Ms. Lynn, thank you for coming." May sat down, feeling strangely nervous. In the daylight, away from the dim lighting of the restaurant, Nathan looked different, younger, less intimidating, though no less intense. "I took the liberty of ordering for us," he said, pushing one of the coffee cups toward her. "Cappuccino. And there's a selection of pastries. The almond croissants here are particularly good." "Thank you," May said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup but not drinking. "Mr. Pierce, Nathan, please." "Nathan," she corrected. "Why am I here?" He smiled slightly. "Direct, I appreciate that." He took a sip of his coffee. "I want to make you a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "A musical one." Nathan leaned forward. "Your playing last night was intriguing, especially your own composition. It showed real talent despite your lack of formal training and practice." May frowned. "I had 12 years of lessons before my parents died." "That's not exactly lack of formal training." "True," Nathan conceded. "But you missed the crucial years, the conservatory education that would have refined your raw talent into something truly exceptional." "Not everyone has the luxury of pursuing their passion," May said, an edge creeping into her voice. "Some of us have responsibilities." Nathan's expression didn't change. "Your grandmother. Yes, I understand. But what if you could have both? Your music and the means to take care of her?" May's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face neutral. "I'm listening." "I want to sponsor you," Nathan said simply. "Pay for you to study with the best teachers, give you access to a proper piano for practice, and cover your living expenses so you can focus entirely on your music. May stared at him, waiting for the catch. Why would you do that? Because I believe in investing in talent, he replied, and because your composition reminded me of someone. There was something in his voice then, a hint of emotion that hadn't been there before. But before May could question it, his expression closed off again. My sister was a pianist, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. She died 6 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, May said softly. Nathan nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy but not inviting further discussion. She was the true musical talent in our family. I just write the checks, he smiled thinly, which brings me back to my proposition. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward May. On the screen was a photograph of a grand piano in what looked like a spacious apartment with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking Central Park. This is my sister's old apartment, Nathan explained. It's been sitting empty since she died. The piano was hers, a Steinway Model D, one of the finest concert grand pianos in the world. May's breath caught. She had only ever played on a Steinway once during a competition in high school. The richness of its tone, the responsiveness of its action, it had been like driving a Ferrari after years of riding a bicycle. I'm offering you the use of the apartment and the piano, Nathan continued. Plus lessons with Thomas Chen from last night. He's agreed to take you on as a student, and a monthly stipend to cover your expenses and your grandmother's medical bills. May's mind reeled. It was too good to be true. What's the catch? Nathan's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. The catch, Ms. Lin, is that I expect results. This isn't charity. It's an investment. I want to see you perform at Carnegie Hall within 2 years. Carnegie Hall? May repeated, stunned. That's impossible. Even with proper training, even if I practiced every day. Thomas thinks you can do it, Nathan interrupted. And after hearing your original piece, so do I. But why? Why me? There are thousands of talented pianists in New York alone, many who never stop playing, who've had proper training all along. Nathan was quiet for a moment. When my sister was sick, he finally said, she made me promise to do something meaningful with her piano. Not just donate it to a school or let it sit gathering dust. She wanted it to help someone with real passion find their voice. His eyes met May's. Last night when you played your composition, I heard something in your music that reminded me of her, a similar soul for lack of a better word. May didn't know what to say. The offer was overwhelming. A dream she had long ago forced herself to abandon suddenly within reach again. What about my job? She asked, grasping for practical concerns to ground herself. My grandmother's apartment? You'd quit the restaurant, obviously, Nathan replied. The apartment I'm offering has 2 bedrooms. Your grandmother would live with you. May took a deep breath. I need time to think about this. To talk to my grandmother. Of course. Nathan pushed a folder across the table that May hadn't noticed before. All the details are in here. The terms of the arrangement, the stipend amount, information about the apartment. Take it home, discuss it with your grandmother, and let me know your decision by tomorrow. May picked up the folder. That's not much time. I'm not a patient man, Ms. Lin, Nathan said with a slight smile. Besides, opportunities like this tend to evaporate if contemplated too long. Or they turn out to be too good to be true, May countered. Nathan laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. Cautious, another quality I appreciate. But I assure you everything I've offered is real. You can verify it all. Call Thomas Chen. Visit the apartment this afternoon. My assistant will arrange it. Talk to your grandmother. Then decide. He stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. One more thing. If you accept my offer, I expect total commitment. Your music comes first. Before other jobs, before relationships, before everything except your grandmother's health. Are we clear? May stood as well, clutching the folder. Crystal clear. Good. Nathan extended his hand and May shook it. His grip was firm, his hand warm. I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow, Ms. Lin. As he walked away, May sank back into her chair, her mind spinning. The folder in front of her contained a chance to reclaim the future she had lost. But at what cost? Total commitment, Nathan had said. Her music before everything else. Could she do that? After years of putting everyone else's needs before her own, Could she make her passion her priority? And what about Nathan himself? His offer seemed genuine, but there was something about him, a hardness and intensity that unsettled her. What would it mean to be indebted to a man like that? May opened the folder and began to read through the documents inside. The terms were as generous as Nathan had described. A monthly stipend that was more than double what she made at the restaurant, comprehensive health insurance that would cover all of her grandmother's medical needs, and access to the apartment and piano for a minimum of 2 years. The only conditions were that she study with Thomas Chen, practice a minimum of 6 hours daily, and work toward a public recital at Carnegie Hall within the 2-year time frame. It was a demanding schedule, but not an impossible one. And the financial security it offered was more than May had dared to hope for in years. She gathered the papers, left a few dollars for the untouched coffee, and headed home, her thoughts churning. Grandma Lou was in the kitchen when May arrived, chopping vegetables for lunch. She looked up as May entered, her wise eyes immediately noting the folder and the expression on her granddaughter's face. "So," she said in Mandarin, "the rich man has made you an offer." May nodded, setting the folder on the table. "How did you know?" "People like that don't give money for nothing," Grandma Lou replied practically. "What does he want?" May explained Nathan's proposition: the apartment, the piano, the lessons, the stipend, and the expectation of a Carnegie Hall performance within 2 years. Grandma Lou listened without interrupting, her hands continuing to move steadily as she prepared the food. When May finished, she set down her knife and wiped her hands on a towel. "And what do you want?" she asked. May sighed. "I don't know. It's an amazing opportunity, but you don't trust him," Grandma Liu finished for her. "No," May admitted. "There's something about him, something cold, like he sees people as pieces on a chessboard." Grandma Liu nodded thoughtfully. "Men with that much money often do. The question is not whether you trust him, but whether you trust yourself." "What do you mean? If you take his money, if you use his piano, if you study with his teacher, can you still play your own music? Can you keep your own soul in your playing? Or will you become just what he wants you to be?" May hadn't thought of it that way. "I don't know," she said honestly. Grandma Lou smiled gently. "Yes, you do. I heard you this morning playing on that old keyboard. That was your music, your heart. No one can take that from you unless you let them." Tears pricked at May's eyes. "But what about you? What about your doctor, your medication?" "I have lived a long life," Grandma Liu said firmly. "I will not have you give up a second chance at your dreams for my sake. If this man's offer allows you to play again, to become the musician you were meant to be, then you must take it. Just remember who you are. Remember why you play." May hugged her grandmother tightly. "I'll call Nathan's assistant about seeing the apartment this afternoon. Will you come with me?" "Of course," Grandma Liu replied. "I want to see this fancy piano that has you so excited." 3 hours later, they stood in the middle of a spacious apartment on the Upper West Side, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of Central Park was breathtaking, but May barely noticed it. Her attention was entirely focused on the magnificent grand piano that dominated the living room. It was beautiful, gleaming black, its lid propped open to reveal the complex mechanism inside. May approached it almost reverently, running her fingers lightly over the polished surface. "Go ahead," said the assistant who had shown them in, a young woman named Zoe. "You can play it. That's why you're here." May sat down on the bench, positioned her hands over the keys, and began to play. The sound that filled the apartment was rich and resonant, the piano responding to her touch with a sensitivity that her old keyboard could never match. She played her composition again, the piece that had caught Nathan's attention. On this piano, it sounded different, fuller, more nuanced, more alive. When she finished, she looked up to find her grandmother watching her with tears in her eyes. "This is where you belong," Grandma Liu said softly in Mandarin. "At a piano like this, making music like that." May nodded, a decision crystallizing in her mind. She turned to Zoe. "Tell Mr. Pierce I accept his offer." 2 years passed in a blur of sheet music, calloused fingers, and the relentless tick of a metronome. May's days fell into a demanding rhythm. 6 hours of practice, 2 hours with Thomas Chen 3 times a week, theory lessons, composition classes, and occasional meetings with Nathan to assess her progress. The apartment had become home. Grandma Liu had flourished there, making friends with the doorman and the neighbors tending to a small container garden on the balcony. Her health had improved with regular access to good medical care, and the worry lines that had been etched into May's forehead for years had finally begun to fade. As for May herself, the transformation was remarkable. Under Thomas's guidance, her technique had sharpened, her repertoire had expanded, and her confidence had grown. She no longer played like someone afraid of making mistakes. She played with authority, with passion, with joy. But it hadn't all been smooth. Nathan proved to be as demanding a patron as May had feared. He attended her lessons occasionally, offering critiques that were always incisive and rarely kind. He pushed her constantly, questioning her commitment whenever she wanted to take a day off, bringing in additional coaches when he felt her progress was slowing. "You're not here to be good," he told her once, after a particularly grueling session with a famous Russian pianist he'd flown in specially. "You're here to be exceptional." Sometimes May resented his interference, his unyielding standards, but she couldn't deny the results. In 18 months, she had progressed more than many students did in 4 years, and now the moment of truth had arrived. Tonight, she would perform at Carnegie Hall. It wasn't a solo recital. She wasn't quite at that level yet. Instead, she was one of 3 young pianists featured in a showcase of emerging talent. But it was Carnegie Hall nonetheless, and the thought made her stomach twist with nerves. May stood at the window of the apartment, looking out over Central Park. The trees were just beginning to turn golden with autumn. In the distance, she could see people walking, jogging, living their normal lives while her heart hammered in her chest. "You should be practicing," said a voice behind her. May turned to find Nathan standing in the doorway, impeccable as always in a tailored suit. He had a key to the apartment, something she had initially resisted but eventually accepted as a condition of their arrangement. "I've been practicing for 8 hours already," May replied. "My fingers need a break." Nathan raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He walked to the piano, running his hand lightly over its surface. "Lily always said a piano needs to rest before a big performance too." Something about the instrument absorbing the player's anxiety. May smiled. Over the past 2 years, Nathan had occasionally shared small details about his sister, her superstitions about performing, her favorite composers, her habit of playing with her shoes off. These moments, when he spoke of Lily with genuine affection, were when May glimpsed the human being beneath the billionaire's calculating exterior. "What time will you arrive at the hall?" he asked. 5 o'clock. "The performance is at 8, but Thomas wants me there early to get comfortable with the piano." Nathan nodded. "Good. I've arranged for a car to take you and your grandmother. I'll be in the audience." He hesitated, then added, "Lily would be proud of how you've used her piano." Coming from Nathan, it was high praise. May simply nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Well," he said briskly, reverting to his usual businesslike manner, "I'll leave you to rest then. Remember, this is just the beginning. Carnegie Hall is a milestone, not a destination." After he left, May let out a long breath. Just the beginning. Sometimes she wondered if anything would ever be enough for Nathan Pierce, but she had to admit that his relentless pushing had gotten her here, to the threshold of a dream she had once abandoned. Grandma Lou emerged from her bedroom, her gray hair neatly styled for the evening ahead. "Was that Nathan I heard?" "Yes," May replied. "Just checking in before tonight." Grandma Lou smiled knowingly. "He is nervous too, I think." "Nathan? Nervous?" May laughed. "I don't think he knows the meaning of the word." "He has invested much in you," her grandmother pointed out. "Not just money, but time, hope. Tonight is as much a test for him as it is for you." May considered this. It was true that Nathan had been more involved in her training than a typical sponsor might be. He attended almost all her major practice sessions, listened to recordings of her playing, even hired a nutritionist to ensure her diet supported her stamina at the piano. "Maybe," she conceded, "but I'm the one who has to get up on that stage." "And you will be magnificent," Grandma Lou said confidently. "Now come, help me choose the right earrings for Carnegie Hall." Hours later, May stood in the wings of the famous concert hall, her heart racing. The first pianist was already on stage, a young man from Japan with brilliant technique. His playing was flawless, and the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. "You're next," the stage manager whispered. May nodded, smoothing down the front of her concert dress. a simple but elegant black gown that Nathan had insisted on having custom made for the occasion. Her hands were cold and she rubbed them together nervously. "Remember," Thomas said quietly beside her, "just like we practiced. The hall is bigger, but the piano is the same. It's just you and the music." May took a deep breath as the applause for the first performer died down. Then the stage manager was gesturing to her, and she was walking out onto the vast stage of Carnegie Hall. The lights were bright, the audience a shadowy mass beyond them. May made her way to the gleaming Steinway at center stage, took a small bow as she'd been taught, and sat down at the bench. In that moment, a strange calm settled over her. All the nerves, all the doubts faded away. It was just her and the piano now, just as Thomas had said. She began with Chopin, the composer who had always felt like an old friend. The familiar notes of the Ballade No. 1 in G minor flowed from her fingers, filling the historic hall with their beauty. As she played, May forgot about the audience, forgot about Nathan and his expectations, forgot even about the pressure of the venue. She was simply telling a story through music as she had done since childhood. When she finished the Chopin, there was a moment of silence before the applause began, warm and appreciative. May allowed herself a small smile before moving on to her next piece, a more modern composition that showcased her technical abilities. But it was the final piece of her program that mattered most to her. After much discussion with Thomas and a rare argument with Nathan, who had initially opposed the idea, May had decided to close with her own composition. The piece she had written after her parents' death, now expanded and refined under Thomas's guidance, but still unmistakably hers. As she began to play the familiar opening notes, May thought of her parents, how proud they would be to see her on this stage. She thought of Grandma Lou watching from the audience and of the long journey that had brought her here, and unexpectedly, she thought of Nathan. For all his coldness, all his demands, he had given her this chance. Without him, she might still be serving plates at the Silver Spoon. Her music silenced forever. The piece built toward its emotional climax, May's fingers dancing across the keys with confidence and sensitivity. This was her story, her grief, her struggle, her resilience, her hope. And as she played the final resolving chord, she felt a sense of completion, as if a circle that had been broken 5 years ago had finally closed. The silence that followed was profound. Then somewhere in the audience, someone stood up. Then another person, and another, until the entire hall was on its feet, applauding with genuine emotion. May rose from the bench, her legs shaky, and bowed deeply. As she straightened, she caught sight of Nathan in the third row. He wasn't clapping with the others. Instead, he was completely still, one hand covering his mouth, his eyes suspiciously bright. Backstage, after taking 3 curtain calls, May was surrounded by well-wishers, Thomas beaming with pride, the other performers offering congratulations, even a representative from a record label expressing interest in her original composition. And then Nathan was there, his usual composure restored, but something different in his eyes. "Well done," he said simply. "Thank you," May replied. "For everything." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. This was your achievement. But without you, without me, you would have found another way," Nathan interrupted. "Talent like yours doesn't stay buried forever. I just expedited the process." Before May could respond, Grandma Liu appeared, her face glowing with pride. She hugged May tightly, then turned to Nathan. "Thank you for giving my granddaughter back her music," she said in careful English. Nathan looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. "As I was just telling May, she did the work. I merely provided the opportunity." "A very generous opportunity," Grandma Liu insisted. "You have honored your sister's memory well." Something flashed across Nathan's face. Pain, grief, acceptance. And then it was gone. He cleared his throat. "Well, this is just the beginning. There's the matter of your first album to discuss, and we should think about competitions. Perhaps some international performances." May and her grandmother exchanged amused glances as Nathan launched into his plans for her future. Some things would never change. But as she listened to him outline the next steps in her career, May felt a profound sense of gratitude. 2 years ago, a demanding billionaire had forced a waitress to play piano until she silenced a room with one song. Tonight, that same song had silenced Carnegie Hall. And in the process, Maylin had found her voice again, a voice that was stronger, clearer, and more authentically hers than ever before. As they left the concert hall that night, stepping out into the crisp New York evening, May looked up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. Somewhere, she liked to think, her parents were looking down filled with pride. And here on Earth, against all odds, she had found a new family, a prickly, demanding, unexpectedly supportive family, to help her music soar.